often, it's the less tangible qualities that most affect an RPG's memorability and fun factor. Case in point, Phantasy Star II. It sucked me in. I finished my 22-hour playthrough in only 4 sessions, and as I play more RPGs, that stickiness, for lack of a better word, matters more than I used to think. I haven't been so hooked on a game since playing Dragon Quest III last year, and a month after playing, PS2 has stuck with me more than usual for these older games. Yeah, I'm calling it PS2 in this video, as weird as that sounds, and before I go on, consider leaving a like. It really helps the channel reach more RPG fans, and subscribe for more videos like this. Anyway, its dungeons may be frustrating and its grind extreme, but Phantasy Star II hits that superb combo of interesting and varied locations, addictive battles and gameplay, varied enemy design, and an in-depth, well-paced story I wanted to see through to the end. Once again, the devs at Sega took ideas from other popular series of the era, adding their own twists here and there. For one, no first-person dungeons this time. Instead, you get all top-down traditional JRPG stuff, with the classic head-on Dragon Quest battle perspective. According to Computer Gaming World magazine, at the time of release, Phantasy Star II was the biggest console game yet in terms of physical storage, a fact on display everywhere. This is one gorgeous game, although certain areas lack much improvement over the Master System original. That's because, well, the Master System was a beast, and I assume the first game was able to use such high-quality assets in its towns, battle scenes, and overworld since its dungeons consisted of simple vector art. The sequel instead gives its battles the simple background art and goes hog wild everywhere else, including the dungeons, which are now like Final Fantasy dungeons on steroids. PS2 puts that extra storage space to use, making everything bigger, immersing the player more deeply in the world than ever since it feels so huge. The scope compared to the original gives me big-time Dragon Quest II vibes. I do miss the vibrant location-based backgrounds from the original's battles, but these dungeons more than make up for it. And when I compare them to Final Fantasy, I'm talking Final Fantasy II with its puzzling labyrinths filled with empty rooms and dead ends, except way bigger, if you can believe that. And of course, the late 80s were the era of powerful monsters and stingy magic points, meaning lots of backtracking to towns. In the early days of RPGs, this kinda slow grind was the gameplay, and I respect what PS2's going for here. You're meant to get lost for hours, grinding while making progress instead of on the side, which I did for a while and came to enjoy once I got in the zone, so to speak. Each dead end and useless NPC adds to the sense of discovery when you do unlock the next story beat. Each time out, you're stronger than the last and can go further and further in through enemy swarms that used to kick your ass. That's all satisfying, though I eventually resorted to online maps for the more complex dungeons in effort to save time. If you've got time, try not to use them since any extra levels gained from wandering around would help a ton, but sheesh, some of these dungeons are nuts. I'm talking floor after seemingly identical floor in many cases, with scant landmarks or items to find, meaning you'll need strong mental mapping abilities or a pen and some paper to help out. Did I mention Phantasy Star II is hard? Normal enemies are capable of dealing massive damage. The RNG tends to not fall in the player's favor, not for me anyway, and the game seems to know this, since it eventually gives you tons of items that a character can use to heal in battle as many times as you want without ever breaking. Rather than making the game easier, this seems more a way to save you the time of backtracking so often, especially as enemies get tougher. It's one of the best features borrowed from Dragon Quest. Also on the plus side, the encounter rate's not bad in most areas. I walked through the entire final dungeon and only got one battle, for instance. It's one of the shorter areas, but in others I might trek through an entire floor without stumbling upon any baddies. You might think this would make grinding take longer, but I never needed to grind much at all in PS2. Maybe a few times to make dungeons smoother once I started using maps halfway through, but the game moves along at a nice clip without much annoying downtime. Quite the opposite, Phantasy Star II is highly addictive. Like I said, I played it over the course of 4 extended sessions and just did not want to put my controller down. That's as good of an indicator of a great game as any, if you ask me. Plus, half the fun of ridiculously hard old RPGs like this is in cheesing them via thorough research and save states, which the version I played on Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection for 360 makes a cinch. By the way, the updated version of that collection, Sega Genesis Classics for PC, Switch, and last-gen consoles, has a similar list of games, including plenty of JRPGs, and is probably the best bang for your buck on the market anywhere. Not trying to shill for Sega, but I'm happy to shill for the preservation of classic games. Anyway, I finished PS2 at level 26 and had no trouble with the final boss. Odd, since folks on the old online forums had me thinking I'd need to be much higher. In reality, Phantasy Star II doesn't require much grinding on a normal playthrough, except maybe before the final boss. Quite the achievement in game balance for 1989. It's got some nice quality of life features too, like the auto battle, which here acts as a dumb attack with all button. That's fine by me, since it's typically what I want to do to avoid wasting MP anyway, but when you do need to manually select moves, you'll have the unfortunate privilege of adjusting to PS2's bizarre, clunky combat menus. In one of those relics of old school design I'd love to see streamlined in a remake, your only two options at the start of a turn are fight and strategy. Choosing fight just executes whatever your strategy is, so if you haven't changed anything, it's your auto battle. Well, great, but against a tougher mob or boss, there's that additional button press every turn to open the strategy menu before choosing actions for each character. It's a minor thing, and I got used to it after a while, but there's a reason games don't do this anymore. It's clunky and it sucks. Something like Lunar's Silver Star Harmony system, where you can create your own sets of auto commands for different situations, would fit this game perfectly, but well. Minor UI gripes aside, Phantasy Star II's got fast and fun combat that's also difficult and varied enough to keep you on your toes. In a nice, albeit strange change of pace for these classic games, there's not a lot of armor in Phantasy Star II. It squarely focuses on you getting stronger and subtly adapting your strategy as you gain access to more healing options. There's multiple optional party members who I didn't experiment with much, as I was happy with my core trio, though you are forced to swap out a character early on for story reasons, in a nice step for the genre that builds on Final Fantasy II's clumsy initial attempt at on-the-fly party change-ups. Phantasy Star II also leans even harder into sci-fi than the original, another trailblazer for the genre as far as I know. You're from the good old Algol system, which, over 1,000 years after the first game's events, has become a pristine, peaceful, utopia-esque technological paradise. On the surface, anyway. For most, life is damn good, but nearly every aspect of society is controlled by an advanced AI called Mother Brain, a term I'm thinking must be a Japanese trope or localization quirk after seeing it used in Metroid as well. As you might guess, something goes wrong with the AI, but not in the way you might expect. This ain't some evil AI takes over story, nope, it's simple human sabotage, which couldn't be more refreshing. The antagonist, Nay First, who was created as a part of the same twisted biological experiment as one of your own party members, Nay has a grudge against the system that created her and screws with Mother Brain's climate controls, unleashing the monsters it had kept at bay. One thing leads to another, and your party ultimately finds themselves on a quest to uncover the origins of Mother Brain and save their star system from destruction. It's solid stuff, backed by excellent immersive world building that fuels the game's addictive nature. I always wanted to see the next dungeons simply because they're dripping with the type of crazy alien techno paradise flavor I dig. I was disappointed to find there's no sweet spaceship animation when flying between planets though. What gives? That was the coolest part of the first game. Man, I wanted to see what the Genesis could do here, but I guess the devs needed the cartridge space. Well. Other oddities here and there mark PS2 as an early RPG. For example, at one point you've got to go to one random discolored tile in the ocean to advance the story. Again, serious DQ2 vibes here, and while I guess the game hints at this enough, it's a wacky method of progression that makes it easy to get stuck if you go a while between play sessions. I don't need that in 2023, but hey, that's what the internet's for. I'll be getting into spoilers from here on out, as there's a few story details I'd regret not mentioning. If you're ready, let's go. The character I mentioned earlier, Nay, is your early game mage, and was born out of an experiment fusing human and biomonster DNA, which in this world makes her super useful in combat. She gets potent healing spells and high agility to make effective use of them, and I came to rely on her. On top of that, the writing makes you care about her plight. Feared by other humans and outcast as a result, she learns a lot from the protagonist Rolf after he lets her join the party. And then, I warned you about spoilers, so I don't want to hear it, she dies. That's right, long before Final Fantasy did it, we've got a JRPG that kills off a main party member who's central to the story, all in a satisfying way. Nay, first, the antagonist reveals that she was actually the being created by the human biomonster hybrid experiments, with your party member Nay spawning later from a part of her psyche or something. I don't quite understand the details, but what's important is that if Nay first dies, Nay will also die. They're kinda like counterparts of the same entity. With no other choice, Nay sacrifices herself as the party takes down Nay first. This loss feels more impactful than, say, FF7's when it comes to gameplay. Nay serves as your only good healer for the chunk of the game she's available. Once she's gone, you're stuck with lame item heals until you get new mages, yet you never get another as useful as Nay. Man, this really does remind me of FF7, only Phantasy Star II was a brutal game where healing is essential, so you feel her loss in a way that directly ties into gameplay. This is one of the best examples of an early RPG doing this. Nay's death also happens fairly early. There's plenty of time to miss her, since as it turns out, Nay First is only the first major villain of a much larger story. Interestingly, Phantasy Star II has a distinct lack of humor, which, you know, I appreciate after playing tons of so-called anime JRPGs. Don't get me wrong, I love those too. Final Fantasy V's quirky dialogue and situations charm the hell out of me, for example, but PS2 decidedly adopts a different approach. The little humor it does throw at you is of the pitch-black macabre nature. It's very classic sci-fi in that sense, almost like reading an Arthur C. Clarke novel. Speaking of which, the game's ending might as well come straight out of a mid-century sci-fi novella, and I'm a bit torn on it. Turns out Mother Brain, the all-controlling AI, was created by a group of human survivors from our own Earth, who, in the time since the events of the first game, covertly subjugated the Algol system, using Mother Brain to fuel their hedonistic lifestyles on their colony ship. Aside from coming out of nowhere, since as far as I remember Earth is never mentioned in the first game, I'm not a fan of the whole "it was us all along" or "humanity is the real bad guy" trope. For one, if the point is human greed is bad, that doesn't really fit, since the worlds of Phantasy Star are populated by people who look and act like humans. Effectively, they are humans, so the greedy faction happening to come from Earth doesn't mean anything. Earth might as well be a random fictional planet in that case. Phantasy Star II's world building is good, but it doesn't put in the work to convince me that an AI-determined quote-unquote utopia could be superior to what we've got here on good old Earth. Human progress ain't that simple, and the sci-fi trope of pretending we can solve our problems through technology alone is at best an antiquated dream. Paradoxically, that's clearly not what the rest of the game suggests, since a failing AI nearly leads to Algol's destruction, so I'm mystified as to what the writer's goal was here. If the point is just to tie this fantasy world in with our real Earth to set up a backstory for the series, I still don't get it. For one, that's not necessary. I can buy into a fictional star system with humanoids regardless. For another, it comes way too late and plays too little of a part in the overall story to make an impact. Finally, this whole reveal fails to provide a satisfying resolution no matter how you look at it, since it sets up a conflict between the Earth colony ship and Algol natives, then ends just as the fight begins. Talk about a cliffhanger made worse by refusing to resolve a plot only recently introduced. I get what they're going for here, like it's really cool and it makes you go, "Oh wow, that's a neat twist," or "Oh, I wasn't expecting that," but that's about all the meaning I can glean from this endgame upheaval. Still, Phantasy Star II at least gave me plenty to think about after completion and easily deserves my highest recommendation. I'm not sure if this is one of the great old-school JRPGs, but it's in the conversation, no doubt. It's got some of the best world building I've seen in any game, not just the classics and not just RPGs, fun and varied gameplay, a rock-solid OST I didn't even mention, and an epic sci-fi vibe I won't soon forget. I can't wait to see what this series does next, but until then, thanks for watching. Leave a like for that algorithm, subscribe for more videos on RPGs, let me know your thoughts on Phantasy Star II in the comments, and have a blessed day.